The Bulls may have found another young stud coming up in their roster already. Alex Caruso talks of his injury are going to be updated in this episode, as well as we'll be updating you on some Zach Lavine trade talks as the trade deadline is just around the corner. I'm your host, Joey Mercer. This is another episode of Bulls Digest, and before we get into it there today, I just want to say that about 88% of you that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you aren't already subbed to the channel, make sure to go down below, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell for notifications, and you will be updated every single time we upload a notification right to the device that you watch these videos on, whether it be mobile, your computer, whatever it is, you'll get that notifications so you can stay up to date with your Chicago Bulls. Before we get into the topic at hand today, I just want to shout out before I forget that Kobe White just passed Scottie Pippen on the all-time list for three-pointers made in Bulls history. I forgot to get a screenshot of that one there in today's video, but wanted to point out a great job for Kobe White surpassing Scottie Pippen, an all-time great for the Chicago Bulls and the NBA in a whole. So we'll get into the topic today without further ado, and that is catching up with the Bulls. So there's a few things to talk about here today. Of course, I mentioned we got another young guy coming up through the system, a guy that has really changed my opinion on him over the past few games because I've been really impressed with what I've seen. We also have to talk about some injuries that have been within the team. Obviously, Vooch and Lavine have came back, and that may have affected Zach Lavine's trade value, which is what we're going to get into in just a little bit. But the first thing, I want to talk about that young guy. And that young guy is none other than Dalen Terry, as he has shown flashes, and there's an injury status check, like I just said. We're going to talk a little bit about Siakam impact Lavine's trade market and other Bulls bullets. This was an article I cited on Bleacher Nation from Elias Schuster, and we're going to get right into that one where it said, Terry is projected to be a decently high impact defender at the NBA level. Not only does he play with a tremendously high motor, but he has underrated size at the wing. He stands 6'7" with a 7-foot long wingspan, allowing him to pester multiple positions. Terry could become a turnover machine thanks in large part to his length, which would also be a good way for him to tap into his other above average skill. So, well said there. I mean, that's exactly what I've noticed from Dalen Terry as of late. He's gotten a lot of blocks as of late, and he's been such a great pest on the perimeter, a great defender, even on switches. He's done a solid job for a young guy who is a slighter weight. Next thing we saw was the 21-year-old was a strong open floor playmaker at the collegiate level. A big reason for this is simply his unselfish nature, but Terry does have a pretty advanced court vision for a second-year player. He still needs to learn that he can't make exactly the same flashy passes he did at Arizona against NBA-level defenders, but I feel like he showed signs of understanding that in this win over Charlotte. While we did get the snazzy behind-the-back feed to Lavine on the fast break, we got three other simple and well-timed assists, whether it was attacking the paint for an easy dump off to Drummond or setting Javon Carter up for the quick catch-and-shoot three-pointer. Terry looked more in control than usual. And it's important to note, too, that game the other night against the Charlotte Hornets was Dalen Terry's first start of his career, and he looked great in my opinion. He looked comfortable out there, and that's somebody that we can definitely build around. I've been very happy with how he's played lately. He looked great in the start, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. It was against one of the worst defenses, one of the worst teams in the league, but it is definitely a sign of potential to come, and I think he played absolutely great. I look forward to watching Dalen Terry in the next game that we have. For sure, I'm going to be looking out for him during that whole game. The next thing that we saw was he has a tendency to play too out of control at times, but the defensive potential is there. Versatile and long defender. Big plus for him in college was open floor playmaking and overall court vision. We saw that smart decision making versus Charlotte. Shot must start to fall though. And that was the tweet by the guy who made the article, Elias Schuster. And fair enough. I mean, that's the only thing that I haven't seen so far is him able to hit shots. He isn't a scorer. That definitely isn't what we've seen. But maybe he can be a guy that can play defense and get a lot of assists. That reminds me of Draymond Green. Obviously, he's not Draymond Green. Draymond is going to get far more boards than Dalen Terry ever has, or ever will, sorry. But Dalen Terry seems like a guy that could play the guard position and bring you everything but the rebounding that Draymond Green can on a much lower scale, of course. But we don't know how good he is going to develop. It's only his second year in the league with the Chicago Bulls, and there's lots of time for Dalen Terry to grow. So keep an eye out for him. That's why I'm telling you right here for the first time. Next thing we saw was still one solid game against one of the NBA's worst defenses isn't going to secure Terry any significant playing time. He'll need to continue to take advantage of whatever opportunities he gets, and he'll also need to prove he can hit open shots. Terry's jumper has remained a major question mark now 2 seasons to his NBA career. The Chicago Bulls coaching staff is going to have a really hard time trusting him until that changes. Let's hope the new head of player development and former shooting coach, Peter Patton, can work some magic. And let's hope. I mean, I do believe that he can definitely develop that jumper. I even had questions on Kobe White's 3, even though it seemed like it was solid percentage-wise. I didn't really trust him in big moments hitting those shots until this year. So maybe that is exactly what can happen. Peter Patton can work some magic, of course, as just said, on Dalen Terry, and we can see a guy that can at least knock down an open jumper or two to add to his repertoire. That would be great. Next thing we saw in this article was a tweet from KC Johnson saying Alex Caruso participated in Bulls non-contact practice Sunday per Donovan, but Patrick Williams did not. So Patrick Williams doesn't seem like he'll be returning anytime soon, maybe another few days. We will keep you up to date on that here at Bulls Digest, of course. But it seems like Alex Caruso could be back in some minutes restriction, and that's exactly what we want to see is him on the court again. Obviously, you know, he hasn't missed much of any time. Same as Patrick Williams, but we didn't know if he was going to be playing next game. So maybe that will be a game time decision now. Next thing we saw in this article was the trade talks is only going to ramp up as the weeks go by, especially with Zach Lavine healthy and looking solid in his first game back. One team to keep an eye on is surely the Toronto Raptors, as they have one of the best names on the market is Pascal Siakam. As different as Siakam and Lavine are as players, there is a very real possibility they are drawing interest from similar teams. The fact of the matter is that only a handful of organizations have the assets and financial flexibility to add someone like them. And that's very true. I mean, if you look at the contracts both of them have, they're quite large. Zach's is a little bit larger than Pascal's. And that is something to definitely take into consideration. Teams that are contending would have to send back multiple players to make up salaries without giving up big pieces. So maybe contending teams are not the situation they will be going to. Maybe it could be teams like the Detroit Pistons or teams with more cap flexibility. It is interesting to see where they're going to go, and we are definitely going to update you on that here at Bulls Digest in the coming days, I'm sure of that. Next thing we saw, though, was unfortunately for the Chicago Bulls, Siakam is likely the more intriguing trade target for most franchises. The forward is owed slightly less than Lavine this season, and he's also known as one of the better two-way power forwards in the league. Not to mention, Siakam's playmaking ability is extremely rare for his size. The big man has averaged about 6 assists per over the past 3 seasons. The only thing working against Siakam is that teams will have to give him a new paycheck as soon as this offseason. So not only do they have to be ready to fork over the big bucks to keep him, but they have to be confident they're not giving up assets just for him to leave. Still, it's possible Siakam's market holds up any potential market that Lavine can create in the coming weeks. And that's the good point to think about as well, as Siakam just made an All-NBA team last year. So if teams are going to acquire him, they need to realize he's going to want big bucks, and he's going to be entitled to it. His contract can be on the same level as Zach Lavine's, and then you need to think, if you're a team acquiring him, do you need a Lavine or Siakam more when it comes to fit? Siakam's obviously a big. He doesn't have the shot creation ability that Zach Lavine has. He's more of a driver. Not that Lavine is bad at that aspect, but Siakam's a little bit better at that. And Siakam's also more of a playmaker and a better defender. But when you have Zach Lavine, he is one of the better shot creators in the league, a great three-point shooter, and can do pretty much anything offensively off the dribble with the ball in his hands, which is why you'd be looking at which player would you rather more. And Lavine right now is not going to have to sign a contract or potentially walk in the offseason. You'd have him for a couple of years still on a big deal, but at least you know he's going to be there. So that would be the reason why Lavine would probably be a little bit of a safer bet than Siakam, although some people might think Siakam's skills are far better than Lavine's. You have to look at the contracts and the monetary values of this, of course. The last thing that we want to talk about in this article today is the playoff odds have updated from Basketball Reference for the Eastern Conference. We have it there, of course, Boston and Philly tied at the one spot at 100%, Milwaukee at 99%, the Knicks at 96%, Orlando 92%, Indiana at 90%, Cleveland 89%, which I think is quite high for Cleveland at the moment, personally. The Miami Heat at 74%, Brooklyn at 19%. Once again, Brooklyn, I guess they're a little bit better than us. That could go either way. Chicago at 14, we passed the Hawks. I agree with that, the way the Hawks have been playing as of late. Of course, we've been in a bit of a foot race as of late with them. Toronto's dropped down to 9.6%. And then Charlotte, Detroit, and Washington out of the playoff picture. No surprises there after Detroit's historic losing streak. Washington is so bad with that dynamic duo, so to speak, of Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole. They've been awful. And the Hornets, of course, have been injury-plagued. And not much talent to support when the injuries are down as well. This has been your host, Joey Mercer. I hope you enjoyed the episode there today as we kept you up to date over the past few days with the Chicago Bulls. Lots of exciting things to come as the trade deadline's just around the corner. We don't know who's going where. Seems like a Lavine trade would happen before anything, but we could make some role player trades before that happens if the Lavine trade doesn't happen. I am excited to see Dalen Terry, as I mentioned, and I'm also excited to see Kobe White, as usual, in the next game. This has been your host, Joey Mercer. As always, make sure to go down below, like and comment on the video, and I'll see you on the next one. Sign off.